What is our me? Is our me mind, brain, or something entirely else? The answers will not only give us new understanding of the brain and mind, but more generally, how subjectivity fits into the seemingly objective world, and how natural sciences can be combined with humanities, social and philosophical sciences. My main goal is to explain subjectivity. I work methodically in the different disciplines, especially in neuroscience, philosophy, psychiatry, combining conceptual and empirical work. The specific methodology of non-reductive neurophilosophy provides novel answers to previously unresolved questions. One should stand upright without being held upright, wrote the Stoic emperor-philosopher Marcus Aurelius in his self-contemplation. For him, his mind, nous, was an inner shelter and space at the same time. The philosophy of life art of the Stoics, techni tu biou, today is more relevant than ever. It shows us how, despite the complexity and unpredictability of external circumstances, we can protect our I from pain and suffering, and empathically embed us in a larger we of people and the cosmos. Mind is a concentrated activity of the brain. Science, like life itself, is a collective mental process. Each reminiscence is a prologue. Memory provides information necessary for future actions. Are there universal principles how art is functioning? There is evidence that music can cause impactful changes in brain structure. Producers and consumers of art thereby make use of creative and constructive abilities of their brains. Artists open up fields beyond actual reality and render them explorable for others. The results of convergent studies demonstrate that art, specifically pictorial art, cannot be perceived independently of beholders' spontaneous and covert activation of sensory-motor circuits, triggered by the actions depicted within the artwork itself or by the visible signs of artists' creative gestures. Furthermore, it has been demonstrated that this engagement of the sensory-motor system plays a role in the formation of subjective aesthetic judgments. In contrast with the centuries-old common wisdom on this issue, these studies show that the explicit aesthetic judgment of the objective beauty of beheld works of art is not solely confined on beholders' cognitively driven, detached and disembodied attitude. Hence, they provide novel arguments in support of the naturalization of aesthetics, moving the field forward and opening new avenues for empirical research. Observing the world is more complex than the mere activation of the visual brain. Vision is multimodal. It encompasses the activation of motor, somatosensory, and emotion-related brain networks. The same applies to artifacts, like three-dimensional objects. The manipulable objects we look at are classified by the motor brain as potential targets of the interaction we might entertain with them. Premotor and parietal canonical neurons control the grasping and manipulation of objects and also respond to their mere observation. The functional architecture of embodied simulation seems to constitute a basic characteristic of our brain, making possible our rich and diversified experiences of space, object, and other individuals, being at the basis of our capacity to empathize with them. Our first act in the world is directed at others. Our original cry is a natural and innate expression of our sociability. However, we do not only cry, we also smile and make eye contact with others. Looking at our social nature, our natural expressions and our communicative acts at a very early stage of our life can teach us what is central to understanding interpersonal interactions. Whether communication succeeds in relationships, families, groups, organizations, or other social systems depends to a large extent on the role of the affects, feelings, and emotions involved. They shape the individual and collective perception, are the decisive motivation system. They influence the direction of our thinking and acting, enable coherence and meaningful life, and decide about well-being, stress, and suffering. An insight into the dynamics of affects, feelings, and emotions in social systems shows possible consequences for a good and effective design of communication processes. What do we, or our brain, process when we have to think something radically different than before? What is our thinking, our perception, our knowledge based on when we reform our competence to change and our creativity? It is a delusion that we recognize something real in what is a perception pattern. Whatever we find expressed at a certain point in the other, in ourselves, in the child, in the consciousness, needs a new interpretation. From this interpretation, the will for the new is created, creativity, overcoming resistance, and the enjoyment of beauty. Through the experience of art, especially through what we experience together, we can experience a detachment from restrictive perception and rigid behavioral patterns, a collection of intention and increased openness to change. Art can reveal what is not visible and give form to hidden possibilities to make recognizable what would be possible. Transdisciplinary thinking, respect for the individuality of every single person, and love open up spaces for imaginative, courageous problem solutions for the benefit of all and protect us from reductionism. The neurosciences have begun to research how our brain body enables us to move in real and fictional worlds, constantly jumping back and forth. We live in relationships with people and objects that are in our real world, but we also live in relationships with people and objects that are part of imaginary worlds, for example, of art. Both forms of relationships are anchored in our brain-body system. Art produces and reproduces at the same time, and we take the position of both the object and the subject. The acceptance of the vague and indefinite opens up horizons and enables fascinating insights. Our passion is to share and trigger emotions, explain facts, and ultimately enable their fruitful application in daily life in our society, trusting in the enormous creative power of our thoughts and desires. The logical and emotional connections between the natural sciences, medical science and the humanities, social sciences and philosophy are interlinked. In this context, the topic of identity, authenticity, who am I? Who are you? Who are we? Illuminated in many facets and as a whole. Art experience, aesthetic experiences have a decisive influence on us.